Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content.
December 30th, 1916, St. Petersburg, Russia. Felix Yusupov, Prince of Imperial Russia, sits in his living room, staring at the notorious Grigory Rasputin, the Mad Monk, the most feared man in Russia. Rasputin takes another sip of red wine and eats another cookie, then continues talking about his strange and unorthodox religious philosophy. His pale blue eyes are wild, his hair and beard long and bushy. Yusupov is one of the richest men in Russia. He is married to the niece of the Tsar. He believes in the system and in the rule of the aristocracy. Rasputin is a peasant. He arrived from the wilderness of Siberia in black priest robes, with only a Bible and a pair of tar-covered boots. Yet through machinations, mystical powers, and perhaps dark magic, he has risen to become one of the most powerful men in the empire. Felix has resolved to murder him. Those cookies and that wine Rasputin is ravenously devouring are heavily laced in cyanide. But it's not working. Yusupov reaches into his pocket for his gun. He has to do this for the good of Russia. But Grigory Rasputin is not going to go down without a fight.
Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am joined today once again by producer Andrew Jacobs. Andrew, how's it going? How are you doing?
I am good. Glad to be back on the show and not just listening to it.
Yes. So we are entering October. As we record this, it's the 1st of October, which, we're getting into Halloween season, which is a thing that I pay more attention to now that I have a small child, now that I have a 4-year-old, than I did like 6 or 7 years ago.
Pumpkin spice everything season.
Pumpkin spice, yeah, a lot of nutmeg going around.
Yeah. We got to get our Halloween fun in before Mariah Carey shows up for Christmas season.
That's right.
So we only have a few weeks before Christmas music starts coming on. So let's enjoy this.
That's right. Yeah, there is no Thanksgiving season. We go directly to Christmas after Halloween.
I will tell you, the Halloween decorations are popping up in the neighborhood here. And I mean, obviously the 10-foot skeleton, it's 10 feet, right?
Yeah, it's nuts. There's a guy in my neighborhood.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's my favorite thing. But our neighbors up the street have augmented theirs, and it is a punk rock 10-foot skeleton. So, it's got a mohawk and like a, leather jacket cut off vest.
Oh, that's awesome.
And like, it's super fun.
There's a guy in my neighborhood who does that. He goes all out for it. But he's a Raiders fan. So it wears like sunglasses and a Raiders shirt. And there's like a Freddy Krueger, like in his front window. He has it like a Freddy Krueger, like peeking through the window, but he's wearing like a Raiders beanie.
Yeah, our neighborhood is like goes all out for Halloween, and then like Christmas, there's like a little bit of this, but it's Halloween, and we get like thousands and thousands of people coming here to like do trick-or-treating. It used to be before COVID, it used to be that there was like we're like a block away from like Hill Drive, and it used to be, the street wasn't officially closed down, but it was closed down. And there were like live bands playing up there and stuff. Like,
that's awesome.
It's a crazy time. It's still pretty crazy, and there's, it's a good time.
We go out for Halloween in my neighborhood. There's one guy a couple blocks away from me who has a Santa Claus with a sleigh and reindeers on his roof year round. Never takes it down. But other than that, it's like not a huge Christmas decoration. Yeah, or just the laziness. Yeah. I'm not going back up on the roof. It was a pain to get up there. Yeah. I haven't gotten mine out. It's on my list for today to get all the Halloween stuff out. We did have some giant like black and yellow spider had eggs or something, because there's monster spider webs with giant black and yellow spiders all around my house now on the outside.
I thought that was a decoration.
No. It's some actual spider like had had like laid eggs or something, because there's like a billion monster spider webs with giant spiders all over the place. So I might not even have
you
to
don't even have to decorate. You're good. You're good to go.
It's okay. Just be careful where you walk when you're outside. But
we tend to have a very pirate themed decor with we got a skeleton and a pirate hat and a patch and a sword, and we've got a pirate flag that we fly. It's
nice.
So.
That's cool. Yeah, I've got our guy's 4, so every year we gain a couple of new things.
Yes,
but it's a growing collection.
You got to go and see what the new.
It's a growing collection.
Yeah.
Go to the Target. Go to the clearance section of Target.
Yeah, exactly.
November 2nd. See what they got.
Yep.
Well, so speaking of Halloween, last year for Halloween, we did Vlad the Impaler, who was one of my favorite Halloween badasses. And you and me were talking a couple weeks ago about who we should do this Halloween, and who was another like infamous historical figure, and a name that comes up a lot when you're talking about like famously evil people is Grigory Rasputin.
Yes.
And I feel like that's the guy that we should talk about this year.
So Ben, one thing I want to talk about though is, Rasputin is a pretty weird dude, kind of a creep, some real questionable stuff. And this is Badass of the Week. And is he a badass? Like, how are we going to talk? Why are we talking about Rasputin? What works for this?
Okay, so this is one of these things that comes up. Yes, he's a weird guy. He's like famously remembered as being evil and having dark, mysterious powers. It's like
a cult leader.
Yeah, he's the most infamous monk this side of the Spanish Inquisition. But so the way that we have defined badass for Badass of the Week is that one thing that all of these badasses have in common. What does Vlad the Impaler have in common with Leonidas? What does Horatio Nelson have in common? Joan of Arc's a badass, but she's a saint. Genghis Khan killed millions of people. What do they have in common? And one thing that keeps coming up is their determination to just keep going regardless of the odds against them. And that is a very Rasputin thing that we will see. He's a peasant from Siberia. He's an illiterate peasant from Siberia, and he ends up becoming the most powerful man in Russia. Right?
I mean, I will say that's a wide lens, and there's a lot of bad people who could fit through that aperture.
Absolutely.
So we do have to draw the line in some places. I will say that my take on Rasputin is, he's a bad dude. But I think what strikes me as badass about him, because he's some questionable stuff that, but we do not, Badass of the Week does not endorse. But what strikes me as badass about him is like sort of the legend of him and the legend of his death. What was sort of left behind is you're just like this weird, creepy dude. And by the way, look at the pictures.
Yeah, right. But he convinced the Tsar of Russia that he had magical powers, right? He convinced like the high level church members in St. Petersburg to follow him. People were like obsessed with him. He was a thing that, like I said, he was from the middle of nowhere, but everybody in Russia was talking about him or trying very hard not to talk about him. Like there were signs up in restaurants in parts of Russia that had a sign that said, we do not talk about Rasputin here. Because like it was believed, it was like Voldemort, like you don't say the name, right? It's
saying, or if you've got kids my age, we don't talk about Bruno.
Right, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
he had that kind of power over all of Russia. And then when they did try to kill him, when people did try to take him out, like it was not easy. According to the story that we have on his death is like pretty hardcore.
So as we proceed to tell the story of Rasputin, I just want our audience to know that we do not condone his behavior. We do not endorse him. And we do not suggest that you try to become a super weird cult leader, super powerful guy.
I feel like we could do this every episode, though. I feel like we really don't condone a lot of the actions of a lot of our badasses we talk about on this show.
Fair. There's a lot of badasses, a lot of questionable stuff. Some more questionable than others. Some guys are just straight up badasses, though.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But it's Halloween, and we're doing
for Halloween, you got to bend the rules a little.
Yes, it is Halloween, and we are doing a Halloween badass, and it actually ties in pretty well to a quote by Rasputin that I want to use to lead into our first ad break here. People are asking him about, oh, you're doing all of these, he's Rasputin. Literally, that's not his birth name. Rasputin is a name that was given to him. It translates to the debauched one. And people were like, well, how do you claim to be so holy when you're out having all of these parties and doing all of this crazy stuff? And his response was, certainly our Savior and Holy Fathers have denounced sin, since it is the work of the evil one. But how can you drive out evil except by sincere repentance? And how can you not sincerely repent if you have not sinned?
There you go. That's a credo to live by.
Yes. All right. We are going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we are going to talk about the mad monk of Imperial Russia, Grigory Rasputin. Stay with us. Rasputin was born Grigory Yefimovich Navik on January 22nd, 1869. And I'm using the modern calendar here. There's this thing with Imperial Russia where we're using a different calendar. They were using the Gregorian calendar and all the dates are weird. I hate having to deal with this. They were using the Julian calendar. I don't know. They're using a different calendar, and I don't like dealing with it. So I'm just going to use those dates. Full disclaimer. So Grigory Navik, he's born in a town called Prokhovskoye in Siberia, and Siberia. It's cold. It's desolate. It's far away from everything, and he is born into pretty severe poverty. He goes to school, but he never learns how to read. He doesn't learn how to read until way later in his life. And he's just kind of living out in the middle of nowhere in Siberia. I mean,
it tells you a lot about him when you come from there. Usually in Russia, I think the bad people get sent to there.
Right, that's true. That's where they put all the gulags.
He started out there. So
yes. He started there, just tough people living in a tough place, and with nothing, and just really rough childhood, I'm sure. Some of the stories I heard was like he was raised in like a swamp or a bog. I don't know if that's kind of like playing into the witch stuff.
Raised in a bog.
Yeah, raised in a frozen bog. So it sucks. And at age 18, he proclaims to have had a religious epiphany. And he leaves Prokhovskoye. He goes 370 miles to a different Siberian town, because Siberia is monstrously huge. It's that the majority of Russia on the map is people don't live in a lot of these areas. So he travels 370 miles to Verkhoytye and enters a Russian Orthodox monastery there. And you will hear Rasputin referred to as the Mad Monk because, he spent some time in this monastery. He never actually became a monk, which is a kind of an interesting misconception about him, but he never actually made it. And we'll see why in a second.
I mean, a monastery's got to be a pretty good improvement over bog.
Yes. I mean, like, I am picturing like
walls.
It's got walls. Like, I'm just picturing like a log cabin in the middle of the forest, right? Like just in a swamp, just bad, right?
Drinking bog water all day long.
Yes. So he walks travels to Verkhoytye. He enters this monastery. And around this time, he is introduced to a very weird sect of Russian Orthodoxy known as Kalisi, which, Andrew, you listened to the Ikkyo Sojun episode with Daniele Bolelli, where he talked about the kind of the Japanese monk who was a Buddhist, but he was kind of all into partying and having sex and drinking and all of this stuff. He's like, this is how you enjoy life. You do this stuff. I'm more Buddhist than any of you because I love to party. So there was and we don't know a lot about this sect, Kalisi, because some of it's like super secret little sect that was operating in Russia around this time. But there was it was something about like fully experiencing your body as part of a religious thing, right? So they would flagellate. They would like hit themselves with whips and stuff, like open up wounds and things, because then you can feel, whatever, feel your body. They would dance and sing, which was not cool at the time, right? So they get this reputation for like dancing, singing. They would have this, like, there was this mystic aspect of it. They would eat funny mushrooms and dance around in the forest and have sex orgies.
Yeah, the funny mushrooms part of this seems like a key ingredient.
Yes, exactly. And so, and they have this reputation for having huge orgies, which whether that was true or whether that was something that their enemies made up to, discredit them, we don't know the answer to that. But Rasputin thought this sounded awesome. 18-year-old Rasputin in a monastery is like, this is cool. I would definitely want to do this.
hell yeah, it beats the bog.
Beats the bog, yes. And so what he decided was that, he came up with this, and he's not Kalisti. He didn't go into this cult. He just heard about it and knew of it and probably encountered it and probably went to their parties maybe, but he was not part of this sect. But what he decided was that the best way to be close to God was what he called holy passionlessness, which is when you have no distractions in your life except for thinking about God. And the only way to get to that point is to just get like super drunk and have a lot of sex. And then when you're done with all of that, you're like, well, I don't want to drink or have sex anymore. I'm cool. I'm just going to lay here and I'm going to be close to God. So that was his... It's a
theory.
That was what he wanted to achieve at all times. Yes. And so that's where he gets the nickname Rasputin, because his name was not Rasputin. He's born Grigory Navik. He gains this reputation for being Rasputin, which is the debauched one.
Nice.
That's where that comes from. Yeah. Amazing. Right. So it may surprise you to find that he did not graduate monastery school and become a monk. He left after about like a year, maybe a little over a year. We're not sure, or I'm not sure. So for the rest of his life, he'll wear priestly robes. He'll wear the big cross and he'll wear the dark clothes. He grows the big long beard like an Orthodox priest would have at the time. And this is kind of like Ikkyo as well, where he's like, I figured it out. I already solved it. I don't need the piece of paper saying I'm a monk. I'm a holy man. I know that I figured it out. Like, I got this under control. I got it. He goes back home to the bog. He marries a woman from the bog. Her name is Prokofskia Fyodorovna Dubrovina. And they have 4 kids together, which... Yeah, I don't know if she ends up coming to St. Petersburg with him or if she stays in the bog forever.
Papa Rasputin.
Yeah, Daddy Rasputin. Yeah. So, yeah, that was weird. That was a weird thing that I learned when I was going through this.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stay in the bog. He leaves again after going back there. He starts traveling the world. He goes to Mount Athos in Greece, which is like a holy site of Orthodox Christianity. According to that tradition, the Virgin Mary and St. John, they hung out there, like they got shipwrecked there and they hung out near that mountain or on that mountain for a while. It's a holy site. So he went there and was like teaching and preaching his weird sect of Orthodoxy. He traveled to Jerusalem and was there for a while. So he's walking around through Greece and the Holy Land. And he has no money and he can't read, but he's just soliciting help from peasants and people that he encounters along the way. He's like, hey, I'm a holy man. They called it a starets, which was just like, I'm not a priest, but I'm a very holy man. And he said he could heal the sick. He could see the future. He could control the weather. He could do all of this. He had all of these magical, mystical powers. And he starts traveling around and people are like taking him. And I highly recommend as we go through this that you look up a picture of Rasputin if you don't know what he looks like, because he has these like crazy light blue eyes that just look like people describe them as hypnotic, and they would say that like he had a hypnotic power with it. Like if he looked at you, you would just be like, wow. Like,
it looks like he's got eyeliner on too.
Right.
He's very emo.
Yes. He's got this huge, crazy beard. They said he wasn't super tall. He was kind of average height, kind of a slim build, but he had this kind of power, like this magnetism about him, where it just felt like you were kind of locked into a tractor beam when he was talking to you, and you could make people do weird stuff by talking to him. And so he's convincing all of these people that he has magic powers, that he can see the future. He can, he talks with this extreme confidence, like God has sent, like I am, I have powers. I can do things. God loves me and wants me to have these powers. He starts gaining this reputation. He's going to all these places. In 1903, he wanders into St. Petersburg, Russia, which is the capital of Russia at the time. He's carrying only a Bible. He's wearing a backpack. He's got a cheap gray overcoat on, and he's wearing these boots that are like covered in tar and mud and probably bog water. He's filthy. He's unkempt. He smells bad. He's got no money. He can't read, but he has this reputation now of being this mystical, weird, wandering holy man. And so when he gets there, the one of the chief inspector of the religious academy in St. Petersburg is this guy named Theophan, and he's like, I want to meet this guy. Let me see him. Like, let me see what he's all about. And Rasputin gets this guy alone and starts talking to him. And by the time they're done, Theophan is convinced that Rasputin can control the weather with his mind.
Not bad.
Not bad, right? I don't know what this guy's deal was, but like he was like, this guy's for real. This is a real guy. He's some kind of crazy, And he must have looked crazy because we're in St. Petersburg, which is in 1903. So it's like, people are dressing.
It's a nice city.
Fancy, nice city. Well, a European capital. Yep. People are dressing nice. There's a very affluent aristocracy here. And here's this dude walking around in these beat up, muddy boots. He probably had some kind of Siberian accent, when he talked. And suddenly he's convincing religious leaders. Like he talks to the Bishop of St. Petersburg, and that guy's like, oh, this guy's for real. Like he's cool. We like him. He starts meeting nobility. He starts going to these parties with like fancy like courtiers, like countesses and stuff. In 1905, he meets the royal family.
I hope he took a shower.
Yes. So this is a weird misconception about Rasputin, is because whenever you see pictures of him, he looks dirty and he's wearing those robes. He's got the big cross on. He's dressed up like an Orthodox priest. But once he starts getting here and he starts going to these parties, he likes dressing up fancy. And so that's a thing that
cleans up. He cleans up well.
He cleans up well. So he keeps the big beard because it plays into his holy man thing. But he starts taking baths. He starts combing his hair, and he starts dressing in like nice shirts. He would get these tall boots. He'd like them to be super shiny. He'd have the pants like all bloused out around them. And so he starts
fancier frocks.
Yes, fancier frocks. And so he starts going to these parties and meeting countesses and telling them about his
weather controlling abilities.
Yes. And so he's kind of becoming a local celebrity, and he's still doing these miracles. He's still healing people or whatever he's doing, right? And in 1908, after he's been in St. Petersburg for like 5 years, he gets a call, and the Tsar, who is the emperor of Russia, and his wife, they have a 4-year-old son. He's their eldest son. He's he's not their eldest child, but he's their eldest son. He is 4 years old, and he has hemophilia, which is a condition where if you don't have enough platelets in your blood. So if you get a cut, a bad enough cut, like it'll start bleeding and it doesn't stop easily. It's not easy to make it stop.
Side note, I believe this was a condition that affected a lot of royals throughout Europe.
It's amazing.
What a coincidence.
It's amazing how many royals got this. It is a hereditary disease. Yeah. So possibly, possibly should have widened the gene pool of the royal families in Europe. But he's the heir to the Tsar, and he's bleeding, and it's not stopping. And the Tsarina Alexandra, she says, like, get Rasputin, get this guy. Like, I don't want the heir to the throne to die. I don't want my son to die. He's 4. Like, get him over here. And so Rasputin shows up, and when he shows up, he's not wearing those fancy clothes. He's wearing the monk outfit, right? He shows up, and he kneels at the foot of this kid's bed, and he talks to him, and he stays with him day and night, prays at his bed, and the Tsarevich Alexei, he gets better. He stops bleeding. He lives.
That's something.
And then they're like, oh, okay, Rasputin, great, you did it. Thank you so much. And as he's leaving, he said, yes, I'm happy to do it. You can call on me anytime. I'll always help. But then he says, and I mean, people believe that he can see the future, right? And he says, you should know that your fate and the fate of the boy and the fate of Russia are forever tied with me. And then he leaves. And he's not wrong. He was telling the truth, right? That is what is going to happen here. But yeah, there is some power in the like, your kid will live and die, and you will live and die, and your country will live and die as long as you keep me around. And that is a thing.
To say that to parents of a 4-year-old, you're oh man, that's rough.
yeah. And like in a world where these two people have unlimited power over the entire country.
Yeah.
And in some ways like Europe, So Rasputin, has gone from being some dude in a bog to the heir to Russia's life depends on you taking good care of me. And
quite a rise.
Yes, we are going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we are going to see what he does with that power.
Yeah.
So in 1908, Rasputin is suddenly a very powerful man in Russia. He has the ear of the Tsar and the Tsarina, and he's suddenly pretty popular, pretty famous. He starts hanging out starts going to fancy balls with
He's a man about town.
Yes, he's a celebrity. He's going to like celebrity things. He's going to aristocracy events. But he's still got these weird like Khaleesi beliefs. He's still this kind of sex maniac with evil powers, right? And so he starts going around partying like crazy, right? He likes to wear the fancy clothes. He goes out, he gets drunk, eats these fancy dinners, he drinks as much as he can, he has sex all the time. His pickup line is to tell women that they will be cleansed of their sins if they have sex with him. Which kind of goes into the creepy, weird stuff that you were referring to in the beginning.
I guess it's going to work on some, I guess.
I guess, right. So it works on some people. He ends up having a ton of mistresses, and courtiers like him, women like him. He's getting invited to all these parties. And like, remember here that he is a peasant, right? And he's not supposed to be invited to this kind of thing. And he's not talking. One of the things that he does is he doesn't, you're supposed to talk to a nobleman differently than you would talk to a peasant. And he doesn't do that. He talks to them like they're peasants as well. And, but
that's
it's
badass.
Endearing. It's badass. Yeah, yeah, and they totally put up with it. It's like endearing when he does it. I don't know, but he's this big time celebrity. But he has kind of that persona where he goes out and he parties and he drinks and he carouses and he does Rasputin things. And then when he comes back to meet the czars, he changes into that black frock and he's very holy and he prays by the Tsarevitch's bed. And, and that's important because Alexei is growing up. He's skinning his knees. He likes to ride bikes. They get him a tricycle because they don't want him to fall off the bicycle. But he does fall off it every once in a while. And then you need Rasputin there to make sure he doesn't bleed to death. So he's important. And, around this time, people are starting to pressure Tsar Nicholas II. Like, hey, what are you doing? This guy's crazy. This Rasputin guy is like a maniac. He's partying around town. He pulled out his wiener one time and was waving it at cops when they tried to arrest him, and they were like, "Get out of here! You got to go!" And he's getting in trouble for all this weird stuff.
Wait, is that a thing, or are you just saying that's the kind of the thing that would happen, or is that
no? That is a thing that he did once, total Jim Morrison vibes. He totally did that and got in trouble for it, and all these people start going
So he's anti-police. Okay.
He's anti-police. He starts sleeping with a lot of these aristocrats, these aristocrats' wives, and the aristocrats are like, "Hey, Tsar Nicholas, we got to do something about this." But he doesn't want to hear it. He's like, "No, this guy, I've only ever seen him be holy, and also he can save my son's life. So what are you doing? You want my son to die? You get out of here!" And so he starts demoting people that denounce Rasputin or repositioning.
Choosing sides now.
Yeah, sending them out to Siberia. You go live in the bog.
Yeah.
And eventually enough pressure comes on Tsar Nicholas that in 1911 he does exile Rasputin. He's like, "All right, sorry, man, you got to go." And Rasputin says "Okay, but something bad's going to happen to the Tsarevich, and when he does, you know where to find me." next time your kid starts bleeding, you know where to find me. I'll be there. You know, I understand.
Here's my number.
Mm-hmm. And he leaves, and then it's like months, like just a couple of months before Tsarina Alexandra is like, we need him back here. Like, get him back here right now. And then he comes back and he ends up living in the palace, or at least staying there for a lot of time, like spending a lot of time in the palace, enough that people start talking that like maybe he has a relationship with the Empress. I don't know. That's never been verified, but it was speculated upon at the time.
Fair.
And so this is where we start to get where like Rasputin is becoming more and more powerful, and people start talking about him, not just in St. Petersburg, not just in social circles, but across all of Russia, right? He's starting to be believed as like this evil, they start calling him the mad monk. He's kind of possessed by demons. There's all these rumors. They called him the unmentionable. They call him the nameless one. They put up those signs, we don't talk about Rasputin here. And so he becomes kind of national news of like, who is this? He's like Wormtongue. Like, who's the creepy guy that's like, talking to our czar and making them make bad decisions?
I mean, that's impressive. Like, you know, the whole, we don't signs. We don't talk about Rasputin here. Like, yeah. That's fun. That's when you know you've made the big time, right?
That's like, right. That's right. Literally. That's badass, right? I mean, he's not the kind of guy you would want. Like, you don't want that guy running your country, but also it's badass.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of the vibe for Rasputin. And so people are talking about him like he is this like terrible, evil person who has corrupted the regime. And they start making up rumors about him. And these rumors are circulated not just by people who have never met him or newspapers looking for stories, or like they're also circulated by like his enemies in court, people who didn't end up on the right side of Rasputin. They saw him and they were like, this guy's creepy. I don't think we should trust him. And then the Tsar was like, get out of here. Some of those guys are getting upset. So there's rumors that he was sleeping with the Empress, sleeping with the Empress's daughters, maybe the Empress, probably not the daughters. He was using black magic and hypnotism to seduce women into having orgies with him. That's possible. I don't know. We can't verify that one way or the other. There were claims that he would drive around, because this is 1911, and there's cars, right? So there was some reports that he would like drive around in a car and like shoot guns at people from the car.
The party's getting wild.
Early drive-by shootings, drunken drive-by shootings in St. Petersburg. That seems unlikely. There were claims that like he would go into the convents in St. Petersburg and whip the nuns and make them have sex with him using dark magic.
That sounds like him.
It sounds like he probably thought about it. I don't know if he actually did it, but he might have considered it. There was a rumor that he had like a humongous, like a 13-inch penis. His penis, at least it used to have its own Wikipedia entry. It doesn't anymore.
But that's a shame.
I know. It was but anyway.
I didn't even see it on his own Wikipedia.
Yeah. It used to have its own Wikipedia entry like 10 years ago. When I first did the article for my website about him. It had its own Wikipedia page.
So the rumor was exactly what?
Was that it was giant and it had evil powers.
Oh, he was giant and evil.
Giant evil.
Happy Halloween.
Yes. That should be my Halloween decoration for the year. Hang it up outside my house. No, it's historical. It's Rasputin. It was actually famous. It used to have a Wikipedia entry. If you go to the Wayback Machine, maybe you can find it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we're dealing with here. And also we're dealing with this at a time when Russia is not doing well, right? 1911, there was a revolution in 1905. There is poverty. There is huge like income disparity. There is like rioting among factory workers and farmers. There's, the country is not doing well. And then in 1914, they get involved in World War I, which goes horribly for them. Yeah, classic. Goes horribly for them. They get completely smoked by the Germans in the opening battles of World War I. There was one battle called the Battle of Tannenberg where one German force defeated 2 entire Russian armies.
Ooh.
Like the commanders hated each other, didn't talk to each other, and they walked right into a trap. And it went so badly for them that like the commander of the Russian Second Army just killed himself rather than report back to the the Tsar. They lost tons of guys. It was a huge disaster. And so in 1915, Tsar Nicholas, he says, well, I can solve this. I think you just need me at the front to command the army, even though he has no military experience and has never commanded an army before and isn't doing that good of a job of running Russia either. So he leaves St. Petersburg to go to the front to go fight the war. And he says, well, who can I leave in charge while I'm gone?
Let me guess.
Yes. So he leaves his wife in charge. He leaves his ministers in charge, and he leaves Rasputin in charge as well. Mm-hmm. And so now he's running Russia, at least, especially as far as like the people of Russia are concerned. He's the guy doing everything. Anything that they don't like that's happening in the country was his fault.
Yeah.
Right. The Tsarina Alexandra, she was born in Germany. Like you were talking about, intermarrying nobility in Europe. Like she was born in Germany. So there's these things like, oh, she's a spy and Rasputin's a evil monk and he's using satanic magic and she's reporting back to the Kaiser and they're all betraying us. That kind of stuff. That's the sort of thing that makes its way into the We Don't Talk About Rasputin restaurants.
The Moscow Post.
Yes, exactly. And so Rasputin, he starts appointing church officials. Like he appoints like the Bishop of St. Petersburg, like that, like weird stuff, right? Church officials, cabinet ministers in the government. Okay. And he's not like filtering for quality or how good they're going to do the job. He's filtering for whether they think he's full of crap or not, right? They're filtering for whether they think he has magical powers or not. So he tries to stack the Supreme Court with people who believe that he can control the weather with his mind.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And people are getting mad. And in 1914, some woman stabs him in the stomach for reasons that are not clear, but could be any number of things.
He deserved it.
He definitely deserved it, yes. He's kind of a bastard. But the guys that execute maybe that's a bad choice of words, but the guys who execute the most successful assassination attempt on him are not like people who are doing it with Russia's best interest in mind. They are rich nobility members who are mad that that some commoner has more power than they do in the government. They are just jealous noblemen who are like, why does Tsar Nicholas like you better than me? I'm like his niece's husband.
Yeah, well, that's a lame reason. Come on.
It's totally a lame reason. Yeah. And so, the Tsar's niece's husband is a guy named Felix Yusupov. He's a very wealthy person. He goes by Prince Felix now that he's married to the Tsar's niece. He gets together with a guy who was a member of the Duma and a cousin of the Tsar, the Grand Duke Dmitry. These 3 guys decide they're going to take out Rasputin. And this is where we get that famous story of the death of Rasputin, which is the thing that kind of cements his legacy as a badass.
Yes.
Right. It's one thing to seize power over Russia when you come from a bog in Siberia and then convince people, like important people, smart people, that like you have weird psychic magical powers. But the death story is great. And the death story, the account, there's a number of accounts, but the one that is the most famous comes from Felix Yusupov himself.
And that's the one we're going to go with.
Yes.
Are we going to go with the one that's most likely or most famous? I think we are
going to go with the one that was the only firsthand account we have from someone who was there. How about that?
Exactly. A witness.
Witness. So his story is that these 3 guys invited Rasputin over to Yusupov's house for dinner. And they were going to have wine and cupcakes that these guys had just completely laced in cyanide.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. So they sit there and Rasputin sits down. He drinks all the wine. He eats all the cupcakes. They're all completely laced with cyanide and nothing happens. He's fine. Doesn't affect him at all. One of the other guys had like a taste of one of it by accident and was like super sick, but so they knew it worked. But Rasputin doesn't get bothered by it at all.
Naturally. Gonna have to try harder than that.
Yes. So then they're just like, all right, we're going to shoot him in the back of the head with a pistol at point blank range, which is what Yusupov does. He pulls his gun and sneaks up behind Rasputin and shoots him in the back of the head. It doesn't kill him. Rasputin falls down, gets back up, starts choking Yusupov, screaming at him about like he was going to summon demons or whatever. Like, I mean, this is Yusupov's account of this, right? But I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get you. And so the two other guys pull Rasputin off and they're fighting him. Rasputin tries to make a run for it. So they shoot him like 3 times in the back while he's like running down the street. He's still not dead. They start beating him with clubs. Then they tie him up and just stick him in a bag and throw him in the river, the frozen river. And there's like a hole in the ice in the river and they throw him through that. And then there were rumors after that his cause of death was actually drowning or hypothermia. Yeah. He had survived all of that.
Of course.
And that's the official version of the story. That's the Yusupov version of the story.
I feel like the version I had heard as a kid was like, it was something like, they poisoned him, then shot him 3 times, and then put him in like a coffin and dropped him in a frozen river. And the whole thing, like the rumor was like there were scratch marks on the inside of the coffin.
Or he broke out of the coffin and like slipped his bindings and swam up, but like barely didn't make it out. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So those are all of these stories. Kind of this legend has grown to that. Right, like they beat him up, they shot him. There's 12 guys there. They were all like kicking, but he was just fighting them all off, and he couldn't bring him down. And so that's the story that we have from Yusupov, is that they cyanided him, they shot him more times, they beat him up, they threw him in a river, and then he died by drowning. We don't know for sure. There's some autopsy report that came out that said he was just shot and that was it. But like, boring, right?
Lame.
Like, let's go with the version, the only eyewitness account that we have of the story.
Exactly.
That's the one that I want to go with for this.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's interesting because these guys came out and they said, we've killed Rasputin, because aristocrats should have more influence in the government and that kind of stuff. And like you said, it's a bad reason. And the people of Russia thought that was a bad reason also. Like when that came out, because the people of Russia, they didn't like him. They thought he was evil and, poisoning the Tsarina against Russia. But when this came out that these noblemen had killed Rasputin, there was some sentiment as well that like this guy was a commoner. He was a peasant who made his way all the way up to become one of the most powerful men in Russia. And they still killed him. He held the prince's life in his hands, saved the prince's life multiple times, and they still killed him. So if this guy has no upward mobility, what do I have, right? What are my options for having a better life for the factory worker, right? And so this became kind of a thing that...
It was a bad look.
It's a bad look, right? It's a bad look for the aristocracy to be killing like the only peasant in the country with any power at a time in which the peasantry is revolting, literally. Like striking and taking up arms against you and stuff. And so...
aristocracy needs better PR.
Right. And then you get, like a year later, you get the Russian Revolution where... the aristocracy is overthrown and destroyed. That's Rasputin.
And in that revolution, they show up and kill the Tsar and his entire family.
Yes, that is what happens. And I don't know that Rasputin is part of the reason for the Russian Revolution, but he is kind of he marks the end of the aristocracy. His death marks the end of the aristocracy, really, in Russia. And that's kind of cool too. For if we're just
and he had said like your fate is intertwined with mine.
Right, he was right. He could see the future. Remember, that was you see. Now we're believers that he had magical powers. After his death, in 1916, his penis was stolen by a local woman and placed in a jar of formaldehyde. And through the 1920s, a group of Russian women who had escaped the revolution brought it to Paris and kept it as a holy relic for a while. And nowadays it's on display in a museum in St. Petersburg, which is a thing that not a lot of badasses can say.
Is it as big as they?
It's as big as they say. Although they did do a genetic testing on it a few years ago, and they determined that it is actually a sea cucumber and not a human penis.
I was just saying, wait, his penis is he had a sea cucumber for a penis. Wow, truly a weird dude.
Nowadays, his legacy, he's remembered as this mad monk, right? That is how we know him.
Yep.
And he is a Halloween villain. He's the bad guy in movies, right? Badass of the Week, Christopher Lee played him in a movie called Rasputin the Mad Monk in 1966, because of course, Christopher Lee played all of the great villains from history. In that movie, he hypnotizes women on multiple occasions, kills a guy by throwing acid in his face, which is pretty badass. Alan Rickman won an Emmy for portraying him in Rasputin, Dark Servant of Destiny in 1996.
Nice.
This is great, right? This is the kind of guy that can inspire movies that are called Rasputin the Mad Monk and Rasputin the Dark Servant of Destiny. So that's just the kind of guy that Rasputin is. He's the kind of person who can inspire movies based off his life that are called Rasputin the Mad Monk and Rasputin the Dark Servant of Destiny. Right.
Nice.
Yeah. He's the bad guy in the Hellboy movies and comics where he has more magical powers. I don't know if you saw The King's Man. It's the prequel of Kingsman. He's in that. He's one of the bad guys.
He's like doing flips and things in that.
Yes. Yeah. He's famously the bad guy in Anastasia.
Of course.
Where Christopher Lloyd voices him. He survived in that. When he survives that assassination attempt, he turns into a lich and puts a curse on the Romanov family to try to kill them all, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because he loved the Romanovs and genuinely seemed to really like them. But in that movie, he's also friends with a talking albino bat voiced by Hank Azaria. So I don't know if we can take that movie as historically.
That tracks.
Very accurate, yeah. He's also a beer. North Coast Brewing's Old Rasputin Imperial Stout. Very serious beer, just like he was a very serious guy. It's Imperial Stout, so it's like a black color. It's like a Guinness plus, like a super Guinness. It's like 9% alcohol. And the can says, a sincere friend is not born instantly. And if you get, I have a glass of it at home, or I should have brought it to our recording, but I have a glass from North Coast Brewing. It's got a big picture of Rasputin, that famous one where he's got the big cross and the big beard and the crazy eyes and the black robes. And it says, never say die.
Perfect.
That's Rasputin. All right. Well, that's the show. That is Grigory Rasputin, the mad monk of Imperial Russia, who tormented and terrified and scared and did all kinds of great Halloween things. That
he showed us all how we can rise up from the bogs,
yes,
to the heights of power and influence.
Right. And he might not have done the same thing with that power and influence that you and me would have done with it, but
yes.
But it is possible. There is a possibility of advancement. Anybody can do great things. That's always been the motto of Badass. Like any normal person can do something historically significant, and that's what we get out of Grigory Rasputin. So, Badass.
Amazing.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We always love having you here to talk to. We also always love the feedback that you guys send us, whether that's emails or comments, likes, subscribes, all that good stuff. It really does help the show out. So we do really appreciate it when we get that from you. So thank you as always. And we will see you next week with a new Badass.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.